Ireland, summer 2012. A country of green hills and ancient stone, of tight communities and long memories. In Black Rock Shopping Center, a woman worked part-time at the newsagents. Customers knew her smile. Colleagues knew her story. Ella O'Hara, 36 years old, spent her days between the shop and her work as a child care assistant. To those who saw her, she seemed ordinary, but ordinary lives often carry weight that others cannot see. Ella had fought battles since adolescence. Mental health, self-esteem, the quiet wars that leave no visible scars. When stress mounted, she admitted herself to hospital. She was honest about her struggles. Her colleagues knew. One day at the shop, reaching for something on a high shelf, her shirt lifted, bandages wrapped around her stomach. She said it was nothing. They did not press further. Her father, Frank, was the center of her world. They spoke every day. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a week. She had also confided in a colleague about a relationship with a married man who treated her poorly. On the 14th of July, Ella contacted the hospital. She was in crisis. They admitted her. Weeks passed. Doctors said she was improving. A night before her discharge, she spoke to a nurse. There was a man, she said. He kept appearing at her home. He had a key. The nurse urged her to contact police. Ella refused. The man had young children. The 22nd of August arrived. Ella was discharged. She spoke to her friend Jane, who described her as excited and great form. There was a festival in Dublin. Ella planned to volunteer. That afternoon, she visited her father for lunch, then drove to Shanganagh Cemetery to place flowers on her mother's grave. They said goodbye around 4 in the afternoon. She needed to be up early. The following morning, Ella did not arrive for her ride to the festival. Frank went to her apartment. Her iPhone sat plugged into the charger. He assumed she had left in a hurry and forgotten it. Hours passed. Silence. He sent a text, the kind of joke he sent when he had not heard from his children. "Are you alive?" No reply. The next morning, her phone remained. Her car was gone. Frank reported her missing. Detective Alton Sherlock began at her apartment. Rope, chains, a black latex suit. Her diary revealed the name of a BDSM website. Her profile was brief, cautious. She said people could not be known until they met face to face. Days turned to searches. She had been wearing a blue zip-up top, navy tracksuit bottoms, white trainers. On the 24th of August, her turquoise Fiat Punto was found at Shanganagh Cemetery. A witness had seen a woman crying there the day Ella vanished, face down on the grass, crying very loud. The witness remembered brown hair but no face. The memory never left. The last confirmed sighting came from a jogger in Shanganagh Park. Ella had asked him for directions to a bridge over railway tracks. His running app logged the time, 5:40 in the evening. He ran past her again moments later as she reached the bridge and stopped. Pieces existed, but nothing connected. Media appeals went out. Weeks became months. Summer became autumn, then winter, then spring again. Almost a year passed. The 21st of August, 2013. A woman walked her dogs in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. She had access to private land through a locked gate. Her dogs ran through the woods. One found bones. She assumed they were from an animal and moved them aside. 3 weeks later, September the 13th, she returned with her dogs. One began scratching at something. She walked past where she had moved the bones and continued along the track. More bones. Tracksuit bottoms. Something inside that felt like a shoe. Her dog returned carrying 2 large bones. She understood what she was looking at. She contacted Frank Doyle, the landowner. She brought him and another man to the area. They found a jawbone. Police were called. At the scene, the woman noticed a knife blade stuck into the ground. The area was sealed. Frank Doyle mentioned something he had found months earlier, sometime between September 2011 and January 2012. String hanging from tree branches, a large plastic sheet, bits of plastic bags, a stick with nails protruding, a jar of Vaseline. Using dental records, the remains were confirmed. Ella O'Hara, only 65% of her body was recovered. Her skull and hands were never found. Cause of death could not be determined. The case became a major inquiry. 3 days earlier, less than 20 meters away, another discovery had been made by chance. On the 10th of September, a local angler met with his brother and another man to check for illegal fishing at the Vartry Reservoir. The water level was unusually low after an extremely hot summer. Normally 15 to 20 feet, it now measured less than 20 inches. They saw something protruding from the water. Curiosity drew them closer. Using a hook on a rope, they pulled items to the surface. Handcuffs, clothes, a restraint. They left everything on the wall. The next day, one of the men returned. The items troubled him. He brought them to Roundwood Station at 1 in the afternoon. The following day, an officer went to examine the area. Wind made visibility difficult. He returned on the 14th, but still could not see anything clearly. 2 days later, conditions improved. Looking over the bridge into the reservoir, he saw handcuffs in water 12 to 14 inches deep. He reached in and began searching. Keys, a knife, a chain with a ring, an inhaler, a loyalty card on the key ring was traced to Ella. Another loyalty card also belonged to her. The officer ran her name through the system. She had been missing for over a year. Her remains had been confirmed the day before. The area was cordoned. Underwater search teams found another phone, a dressing gown, 2 SIM cards, shorts, a rucksack, glasses. The prescription lenses were traced to Ella. The reservoir had overflowed the previous summer after heavy rain. The next year brought drought, the driest summer since 1995. The changing water levels revealed what had been hidden. On the 21st of September, about 500 yards from where her remains were found, another search uncovered tape, hacksaw blades, cable ties, shorts, trousers, a shovel. Investigators believed this was where she had been brought and killed. The phones had been underwater for over a year. Forensic teams attempted recovery. Remarkably, they worked. Hundreds of messages emerged, messages detailing the last week of her life, a relationship. Each phone had the other number saved. One as MSTR, the other as SLV, master and slave. Roughly 250 text messages showed violent sexual fantasies, an urge to rape, stab, and murder a woman. "I'll stab you next year." "Not if I get my way," she replied. "You don't get your way." "What if only one?" "It will set my recovery back. You need to understand it's something I want." "I'm sorry, sir. I will miss you." There were 2 phones she had been in contact with. One ending in 86, the master phone. The other ending in 83, a pay-as-you-go phone never recovered. On the 17th of August 2012, a text from this person read, "Did a huge walk up to the Dublin Mountains the other day. Very lonely hill walkers up there. Just to find a route back with no cameras, and I'm sorted." She had been found in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains. On the day of her disappearance, she had allegedly said, "Please don't mention killing for a while, just until I settle back in life, sir." Analysis of phones and cell towers led investigators to check toll records. They looked for a car registered to a man who worked in central Dublin and lived in the south of the capital. The phones had been used in South Dublin and Baggot Street in the city's center. References to flying appeared in the messages. One said was up flying at the weekend, skeleton ribcage where the knife went in. Want to do a woman next. This referred to a sheep he had stabbed. Another message from early June 2011 mentioned terrible weekend, 15% pay cut, and came 5th into flying. A suggestion was made. Not a pilot. Someone who flew model planes. They checked the Aeronautical Society website. The competition from the 11th of June. The rankings. The man who came 5th. A name that Ella had written in her diary. The system showed he had reported 2 bikes stolen from a business on Baggot Street, though an architecture firm. One of Ella's friends had mentioned she was in a violent relationship with an architect. Everything began to fit. The 17th of October, 2013, 7 in the morning, a man was taken into custody. Graham Dwyer, 41, married father of 3, arrested on suspicion of murder. A massive search of his home. Items seized. Over 24 hours, 5 interviews. He was certain, "I didn't kill anybody. I'm worried about my wife and job. I'm worried about being associated with this case. I will say nothing. I have nothing to do with it. I want to go home." 2 detectives had taken items from bins at his family home. DNA from a container of car wax matched a profile on Ella's mattress, the mattress with puncture holes and blood stains. Detective Sergeant Peter Wood saw how Graham assumed officers were stupid. Feeding his ego made him talk. They discussed his life, his work as an architect, his family, flying competitions. Each time, they placed him in locations where the phone had been. The pay-as-you-go phone ending in 83 had been registered using a fake name, a variation of an acquaintance's name. He listed what he thought was his sister's address. The alternative contact number was his real number with only one digit changed. The master phone, the 86 number, moved around at the same time as his vehicle. Over 200 days of CCTV from Ella's apartment building were reviewed. On the 23rd of June, 2012, Ella arrived home at 6:54 in the evening. 10 minutes later, a man entered the building. He covered his hand while pressing the lift button and kept his back to the camera. He left at 8:18. 1 week before Ella was last seen, the man entered with a rucksack similar to the one found in the reservoir. Graham was asked where he had been on the 22nd of August 2012. He could not remember. Officers showed him CCTV stills of Ella with a man at her building. They believed the man was him. I'm glad I'm not murdering anyone in any of those photographs. I didn't kill anyone. He later admitted to a sexual relationship with her as part of a BDSM relationship. He was the dominant, she the submissive. Why was his DNA in her apartment? I can understand how you found it, but I didn't kill anybody. I wouldn't be surprised if you found my hair or fingerprints there. At one stage, she asked me to kill her. Officers suggested he left her body where he could return to it. He called the accusation disgusting. The Computer Crime Investigation Unit examined the phones. Digital footprints pieced together years of connection. An email from one of Ella's old computers came from someone using a profile on an adult's. The username Architect72. Profiles were found on an old computer for an adult site in 2006 using the name Submissive391. This profile had viewed another profile, Architect77, 4 times in 2007. The email for Architect72 was linked to the email address Fetish Boy. One email sent on the 19th of September 2008 read, "I hope you're keeping okay. Assumed you're trying to get better and trying to stay away from what we do together. I completely understand. You should know I am always thinking of you and hoping you are safe and not suffering too much on the inside. Anytime you want, I will gladly carry out what I promised I would do, regardless of the consequences. You can call me from a phone box, even if it's months away or years. I'm always waiting. Get in touch anytime for a chat or for the simple harmless things you like to do. Take care, kiss, sir." More than 2,500 messages over 18 months. Graham said neither phone belonged to him. The text followed themes. Ella was asked to find someone for him to stab. He wanted her to let him stab her. Their relationship appeared to end in 2009, but resumed on the 25th of March 2011 after Graham got back in touch. "Hi Elaine, hope you're keeping well. Who is this, please?" From that day to the 11th of April, their communication reignited. Messages included, "I want to stick my knife in flesh while I'm sexually aroused. I would like to stab a girl to death sometime. My urge to rape, stab, or kill is huge. You have to help me control or satisfy it." The 28th of March 2011. "Any news on baby? Not yet. Has to happen this week, anytime now. When are you free next?" The following day, "You still on? Wife not in labor or anything? So far so good, got fake knives. Lucky me, lucky you if I don't use the other one." The 30th of March. "Went well today, sir. I take it you are now a daddy again. Thanks for last night, sir. Really needed it. Yes, beautiful baby girl. Glad you enjoyed the other night. Many more sessions to come. See you sometime over the weekend." Also in March 2011, Ella met a man named Robert through an adult dating site. She later reported being pregnant but lost the baby. Graham Dwyer was born in September 1972. Easygoing, well-liked, normal childhood, scouts, weekend work, bass player in a band. He studied architecture at Dublin Institute of Technology. Around that time, he fathered a son with his girlfriend. In 1997, he met Gemma. They dated, married, began a renovation featured in the Irish Times. His architecture work appeared on the television program Beyond the Hall Door. He was tech-savvy, loved cars and model airplanes. The mother of his son from the 90s said he discussed fantasies during their relationship. He allegedly told her he fantasized about stabbing a woman during sex. He brought a knife into the bedroom and acted out stabbing without doing it. Shown footage from Ella's apartment, she identified the man as Graham. When told this in interview, Graham called it nonsense. "Oh my God, I'd say she enjoyed reading that. She wants to hurt me." On the 21st of August, days before Ella's disappearance, she sent a message to the 83 number. She was excited to leave hospital but worried about coping. The reply: "If it doesn't work out this time, the way out is through me." That day, a book special hunting knife was delivered to Graham's office marked private and confidential. Ella was last seen the day she was discharged. Graham had been in touch. He told her she would be punished for going to hospital. The punishment was going to be big. She was to leave her phone at home, drive to Shanganagh Park, park her car, walk over the bridge, go towards the shore, and wait. "You have a big punishment coming up, getting knifed in the guts. You will be well bound and gagged, tied to a tree deep in the forest. I have a spot picked out. We'll go to the woods. I'll take off your clothes, stab you, bury you, leave your clothes in your car by the sea, and it looks like you drowned." Ella walked through Shanganagh Park trying to find the bridge. She asked the jogger for directions. On the day she disappeared, Graham's work phone pinged off a cell tower in Dublin at 4:55 in the evening. Not until several hours later at 8:59 did it ping off a tower in the Fox Rock area. It is believed it was switched off during those hours. He was using the master phone to contact her. The 18th of October, 2013. Graham Dwyer was charged with murder. He appealed for bail. Unsuccessful, his trial attracted intense media spotlight. He entered a plea of not guilty. Judge warned those in attendance to prepare for graphic and disturbing evidence. Graham did not give evidence. His defense was simple. Nothing linked him to her death. No evidence of stab wounds on her skeleton. She could have taken her own life. Prosecution countered. If she had been responsible, why were her clothes, keys, and belongings found miles away in the reservoir? Her mental health problems made her a more attractive victim. They argued. Her death could be more easily dismissed as self-inflicted. Documents found on a hard drive at his property described rape and murder in graphic detail. The defense called them fantasy. The prosecution said this was someone making disgusting fantasies real. Graphic videos were found on his computer showing him stabbing women during sex, including Ella, who could be heard screaming. At the end of one video, he said, "Now that wasn't bad, was it?" Police tried to track down the other women in the video. They were blindfolded and did not know they were being filmed. A woman from the United States named Darcy testified. She met Graham online. He said he would kill her if she wanted to end her life. The prosecution presented a pattern of behavior. In June 2011, he asked Ella to look at remote properties needing renovation, hoping to find a young female auctioneer to prey on. A drunk girl, a homeless person, a sex worker were suggested as possible targets. A woman working opposite his office was also on the list. His threats grew more extreme. He was deeply manipulative. The prosecution said the phones were like his shadow. He could not hide. A message about stabbing a dead sheep, want to do a woman next. It was a fantastic feeling. So happy. Another, it's a tough choice. Either you let me stab you or help me do it to someone else. He said he would wait until we have the perfect plan. She replied, "You know there's no such thing as a perfect plan. Lots of people have stabbed and got away with it. Why not me? I can put you to sleep. Stop. I know you wanted 30 seconds to slip into oblivion. All, please, I have to think and decide. Please stop." The messages devastated her family. Injuries her colleague had seen on her stomach around 2008 were injuries Graham had allegedly inflicted. The prosecution said messages showed a deep-seated, passionately held, irrepressible desire to get sexual gratification by stabbing. At one point, she tried to end things, saying she wanted to become a mother. He said he would father a child if she found him a victim. A life for a life for a life. She said no. He offered money. She said no again. He became verbally abusive, said she would never find anyone. Her father told the court she disclosed information in early 2008. "She was in my house one morning and we had an argument, maybe about money. She was poor at having money. And she said, 'I'm seeing someone, a professional.' I said, 'Is he married?' And she said yes." Her father choked back tears. Ella told him she was being tied up by this man for sexual gratification. The man she was seeing was an architect. Graham's wife, Gemma, testified. She had no idea about this side of his personality. Extremely disturbed. distressed and upset. The shovel found was said to have gone missing from the family garden. She recognized the paint splatter from when they painted their fence. A forensic scientist later said the paint was not a match. Gemma explained on the day Ella was found, she and Graham had been out for dinner in Dublin. She was sure of the date. It was both of their birthdays. Nothing appeared wrong. 4 months after Ella went missing, he attended a taping of The Late Late Show. A picture showed him in the audience. On the 39th day of the trial, Justice Tony Hunt explained he would not grant an application by the defense regarding evidence. He said it was obvious Graham not only knew Ella well and had a sexual relationship with her, but was the person using the number ending in 83. He referenced the identical bag seen at Ella's apartment, then fished from the reservoir. The silence of the master phone after she went missing was noted. The judge said Graham had been inundating Ella with messages about fantasies from a particularly sick mind. Evidence showed aspects of behavior that were relevant and disturbing. These comments were not made in front of the jury. The trial lasted 43 days. 194 witnesses testified. In a closing statement lasting 3 hours, the prosecution said Graham had the intent and desire to murder Ella O'Hara. This crime reflected almost point for point the plan he had created. Ella had been vulnerable, at a low point exploited. Her low self-esteem was used against her. All she wanted was not to be stabbed, not to be beaten. She wanted companionship, love, ultimately a child. The judge told the jury to leave sentiment and emotion out of their decision. The jury deliberated for 7.5 hours. The unanimous verdict came in. Graham Dwyer guilty of murder. He appeared surprised. He closed his eyes and shook his head. The judge thanked the jury. They had sat through horrendous evidence. He agreed with their decision 110%. He said he would not normally give his opinion, but completely endorsed the verdict. He showed enormous empathy for Graham's wife, Gemma, saying she was most cruelly deceived. "We may be thankful that a dangerous man is now out of the way," he said. Graham showed no remorse. His sentence was richly deserved. Graham Dwyer was given the mandatory sentence of life in prison. After sentencing, Gemma said her thoughts and condolences were with the O'Hara family for the grief and pain they were suffering. Following conviction, detectives looked into other unsolved murders, including Rayanaid Murray, stabbed to death, aged 17 after a night out with friends. The case was referenced in messages between Graham and Ella. No further developments are available. Her case remains unsolved. Detective Sergeant Peter Woods said he believed Graham filmed the murder. Although no such video was found, based on evidence on his computer and the things he found satisfaction in, he had no doubt. He also had no doubt if Graham had not been caught, he would have killed again. I don't actually believe he killed before. That's my personal opinion. What informs me is the text messages. I want to do a woman next, and it builds up from there. I know a bit about sexual offenders. They tend to build up to an offense, commit the offense, then stop for a while. When they stop, urges build up again. I have no doubt if he wasn't caught, he would have built up to murder somebody again. Bear in mind, on the morning he was arrested, he had been looking at some really gruesome stuff on his phone the night before. It emerged that in 2011, Graham contacted a woman randomly on social media. He offered to help her build a house on remote land. He came down every weekend on the train to visit the site. There was a big hole dug in 2010. Graham had access and went to the site several times by himself, remote and isolated. It just struck me as unusual the way he was so keen to help. I offered payment and he said he would only take money once planning went through. The planning application was turned down. The woman and her family moved away. When I heard he had been arrested and what for, I just thought, thank God I'm not buried up there. I would have been up there some summer evenings late with him. It makes my blood run cold. It was so remote nobody would ever hear a thing. He would often come down on the train and go up on his own taking loads of photographs. Then it came out in court he had been checking isolated sites. Thank God we didn't go any further. Detective Sergeant Peter Woods recalled a joke Graham made while in court trying to get bail. He met him in the Supreme Court. At that point, Graham had been in custody for several months. He thought he was going to get out. He was appealing the High Court's decision to refuse bail. It's the one time you interact with them because in the courts you all just sit together. He said to me, "How are you, Peter? How's it going?" I said, "Grand. How are you getting on in prison?" "Grand," he says, "they had me working in the kitchen." I didn't think they'd give me access to knives so quickly. Graham Dwyer later launched an appeal against his sentence regarding phone data gathered in the inquiry. An opinion published by an advisor to Europe's top court strengthened the case taken by Graham Dwyer over retention and accessing of his mobile phone data. If the judgment of the Court of Justice of the EU followed the same lines as the opinion, it could have significant implications for investigation of serious crime across Europe. Mobile phone metadata showing where his phone was and who he was in contact with played an important part. The data was retained and accessed under Irish legislation brought in following an EU directive later found invalid. In 2018, the High Court found the legislation breached EU law. The Supreme Court referred issues to the Court of Justice of the EU for clarification. At a hearing in Luxembourg, the state argued ability of law enforcement agencies to use retained data was essential to upholding the rule of law. The Irish position was supported by 13 other member states. Graham's lawyers argued the Irish legislation was extreme. The advice of an advocate general was non-binding but would inform the court's judgment. The Spanish Advocate General said general and indiscriminate retention of telecommunications data was justified only by protection of national security, not prosecution of serious offenses. The Irish legislation allowing it to be retained for 2 years and accessed without independent oversight did not comply with EU law. After judgment was issued, the matter would go back to the Supreme Court to make a final decision, taking account of the European Court's binding ruling. Almost 7 years on from conviction, Graham Dwyer's appeal had still not been heard. Lawyers waited for the final outcome. If the Advocate General's opinion was endorsed by full judgment, it would bolster his appeal. The Supreme Court would likely rule in his favor and uphold the previous High Court judgment. But that was not the end. His case then had to go to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal would hear arguments from both sides before making a decision about whether mobile phone metadata should have been admitted as evidence in his original trial and what impact that would have on his conviction. While mobile phone metadata was important, it was not the only evidence, not the only circumstantial evidence considered by the jury. There was a long way to go. A favorable decision for Graham Dwyer in the Court of Justice of the EU did not necessarily mean he would be successful in overturning his conviction. The family of Elaine O'Hara said they hoped she could now rest in peace following dismissal of her murderer's last-ditch Supreme Court appeal against his conviction. The court unanimously ruled evidence of mobile phone metadata was admissible in Graham Dwyer's trial in 2015. He would continue to serve a life sentence for murder. The Court of Justice of the European Union and the Supreme Court found legislation under which evidence was retained and accessed breached EU law. But that win did not help overturn his conviction. The legal proceedings ended with the Supreme Court's definitive dismissal of his appeal. I note there was substantial evidence linking Mr. Dwyer to Ms. O'Hara in various ways. The cornerstone of the prosecution case was the content and timing of text messages which on the prosecution case were sent by Mr. Dwyer to Ms. O'Hara as well as messages sent by her. On the prosecution case, once those messages were attributed to Mr. Dwyer, it was inevitable the jury would convict. Attribution of those messages to Mr. Dwyer was an essential building block of the prosecution case. I analyzed evidence linking Mr. Dwyer to the phones from which those messages had been sent, the so-called green phone and master phone, as well as evidence linking Miss O'Hara to the phone not registered to her, the so-called slave phone. That evidence had not been challenged or contradicted. Thus, even without the disputed traffic and location data relating to Mr. Dwyer's work phone, the remaining evidence available to the prosecution was more than sufficient to establish attribution beyond any reasonable doubt. The evidence was overwhelming and unanswerable. There is no question of any lost chance of acquittal in this case. Therefore, even if traffic and location data relating to Mr. Dwyer's work phone had been found inadmissible, I would have upheld the decision of the Court of Appeal to apply the proviso and would have dismissed the appeal on that basis. I would therefore dismiss the appeal. Accordingly, the order of the court will be that the appeal will be dismissed. Legal sources did not believe Dwyer had any further realistic options to challenge his conviction. He would continue to serve the life sentence imposed more than 9 years ago. Elaine O'Hara was a trusting, vulnerable woman. This was not about BDSM. This was about deliberate abuse of trust and power. Healthy relationships are grounded in communication, consent, mutual respect. All were absent in Ella's case. What happened to her was not about preference or lifestyle. It was about manipulation, control, complete disregard for her autonomy. It was about a man who saw an opportunity to dominate and abuse someone to use her to satisfy his own ends. For Ella's family, trauma and pain will never go away. It was heartbreaking for us to listen to the text Elaine received from a depraved and diseased mind. The manipulation of her vulnerability was apparent. When she tried to resist, she was reined back in. We can hear her voice in those texts, just wanting to be loved. Hearing the contents of those videos will haunt us forever. This is our life sentence. For us, there is no parole.